Welcome to 2Cents FC. I'm your host, Amobi Okugo, here with my guy, L. Each week, we'll be discussing topics from around the soccer world and giving you our unfiltered thoughts and opinions. This week, we're changing it up a little bit. We got the host of RiverCity 93 and Can I Kick It podcast, Yogi, and founder of Non-League America and friend of the show, Steve Bayley. Thank you guys for joining us. Happy holidays to anyone listening. L, let's get right into it. I know we got a lot to talk about, a lot to unpack. What you got for us this week?
Yeah, so this week we're going to be talking about something that's a very sensitive topic, a polarizing topic in soccer Twitter primarily, but something that a lot of people have been championing, mostly people who support lower league teams and stuff like that. They want the soccer system to be more open. So Pro Rel is what I'm talking about if you haven't caught on yet. But one thing that I noticed that Yogi actually brought up in a Twitter conversation that kind of piqued my interest is the economic effects of Pro Rel. So a lot of times when you hear the Pro Rel discussion, we're talking about strictly from a sport perspective or from, a team perspective, like allowing my lower league team to work its way up to the big leagues, et cetera. But we never talk about the economics of having this open system, how that affects communities, who gets the trickle down effects of this open system. So I want to jump right into it. I'll let Ellie go first, and then Steve, you can give your perspective. But go ahead, man.
All right, yo. So first of all, just want to say thank you guys for having me on again. Also, I'm gonna open up. I'm not like anti-pro rel. It might come across that way, but I'm like, I am for pro rel, but I'm anti of just doing things just for the sake of doing things, like just throwing it out there and be like, hey, it's gonna fix everything. And so for those who don't know, like I'm a history major, so I've always been taught in my history classes to like kind of question everything, not like from a negative standpoint, but more of a standpoint of trying to understand why things happen the way that they do and how do they impact things down the road. And that's kind of like my thing with pro rel. It's more of the sense of if pro rel happens, one, who's the governing body that's going to implement it? How does that governing body implement the system? Is it going to be a thing of which it comes from the top down or the bottom up? And then also, like, how does this affect, like, Black communities, Latin communities, things of that nature? Because what I've seen from some people on Twitter is about how if you implement pro rel, automatically Black people are going to love the sport. And that's the thing. I'm like, I don't see how that like mindset works. And also, like, I mean, Elle, you saw the conversation about how the guy was trying to tell me about how that once pro rel comes in, it's gonna obviously you're gonna have like these Black owners that's gonna start owning all these sports and start owning all these teams. And I get that. My thing about that is, one, when I was saying like the whole trickle down economics about it is, when something like this happens, we know that sometimes Black people are going to be the back end on the stick up. It's not designed that way, but usually that's what happens. There's not a lot of Black ownership already in sports. Like from my recollection, I think I could count maybe 4 Black owners, 4 or 5.
In soccer or just in general?
In soccer.
Yeah.
In soccer. I can only think of like 4 or 5.
Yeah, you got Magic Johnson, Kevin Durant, James Harden. And then I think Trevor Broker, he's part of the DC.
Okay.
And then you got the USL.
Yeah,
USL
Beasley, Charlie Adams. I know there's one in Corpus Christi, Maryland Bobcats.
G-Day, yep.
And New Jersey Teamsters. Is there anyone else I'm forgetting? I mean, even then, that's what, maybe 8?
Yeah.
Maybe 8, really? So then my whole thing about that is I'll kind of look at the situation. They might not be the exact same, but I kind of just, if you peel back the onion and look at it, almost like how the marijuana kind of came into America, about how Black people, we've got some of the heavier charges for it. But now all of a sudden around like 2017, 18, 19, 20, and so forth, you kind of see now distribution centers trying to come out about, I can speak here from Virginia. Like they just built a distribution center down here in Chesterfield, and that's majority white people owning it. But it's harder for African Americans to get into it and get like a viable foot into it. Like if you're a felon, you can't get into it, or to get like you have to go through a certain reviewing board, and it's kind of like a who's who. And that's kind of where I have that struggle and fight with it with pro rel with some people. And not like I'm trying to pick a fight, but it's more a sense of like, one, I want to know where you stand, but then also I want to know like, how is this going to affect people of color in the sense of not only where do we benefit from it, but also how do, say like 10 years down the road, I want to become an owner. Am I going to have a viable foot into getting into that system the way how it's built? And then the trickle down economics of it, like how does that work? How does that get spread out across? Because one thing that I've seen some people think on Twitter is that, I think I said it before, like if you build pro rel, then black people are going to love the sport. And that's not true because, and once again, I can only speak for my community. The hardest thing about getting African Americans into the sport is because, one, we see no one like us. Two, it's seen as a pretty boy, white boy sport, almost like lacrosse, And then three, there's no one in that particular family that teaches that sport. And then four, I hate to say it, it might sound messed up, but I mean, you guys will understand where I'm coming from when I say this, of how there's no direct path for us to go to college or go to the pros and make money to then support our families. Because that's when you have so many kids get shipped to football, basketball, baseball. It's not because of the fact of it's a monopoly and things like that. It's because of the fact of you've seen that route work so many times that it's like, I'm going to put my kid here. Like me, for instance, I love soccer. I've loved it growing and playing up. But in the South, oh, you 300 pounds? Oh, you're going to play on this offensive line. Like that's the way how it works. So it's kind of that thing about it. And, how does having pro rel then disappear into like having this small local club being more into the community and things like that? And then also like my struggles with some teams are, and this is all teams across the board. Like I tell the Richmond Kickers the same thing. Like y'all expect people to come to you. You don't go out into their communities and meet them. And that's one thing that in the Black community, why we have never really latched on to soccer, I feel like, is because it's a white person sport in America. It's a sport of access. Like I have to almost put like a foreclosed mortgage to even have my kid play, Sunday league soccer. Where in basketball, I know it's a support system there. I can have my kid play elementary, middle school, high school for free if I wanted to. And then on top of that, if you want to play AAU. But there's enough money in the AAU basketball team where the coach is going to pay for it. Is that same access in, amateur league soccer for kids? So I know I've been rambling for a minute, but I'm going to stop there.
No, I think that's a good starting point, a good kind of, I guess, foundation to kind of, I guess, give a different perspective of, what the effects of pro rel, can bring to another community. Like, so Steve, what you got, man?
So first of all, again, thank you for having me as well. But I want to, there's a lot to cover, and Ellie, you just covered a lot of stuff. I've been taking notes, so hopefully we'll kind of work our way through this.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Let's start with this trickle-down economics.
Okay.
On a personal level and on a professional, semi-professional analysis of pro rel, I am 100% against trickle-down economics, and I think that's not what this is. MLS is trickle-down economics, is billionaires, taking access and leaving others out, and letting, if there's scraps, let the poor people pick up the scraps. That's trickle-down economics. That's Republican thinking. That's the people who are the billionaires who are involved in like that's their world. That love pro rel or hate it, it is what it is the opposite of trickle-down economics. It is empowerment from the ground up. Whether you believe it can be successful or not in the United States. That's the net. We'll get into that. But just like the nature of the structure, it is every team at every level, all the way down to the 20th division, naturally has some kind of equity because it is an independent business that is not responsible to any other business or any specific franchise. It's going to rise or fall on its own in an open system. It's the free market. And in some ways that's even more right wing. It's a brutalist free market interpretation. There's going to be billionaire clubs at the top, and there's going to be Sunday league for amateur clubs at the bottom. But it would be one system where the results are decided on the field, and as you climb high enough, not all the way to the bottom to the 20th division, but somewhere wherever the lines of demarcation are between that murky area where amateur transitions into semi-pro, into pro, there's going to be revenue streams naturally built into the system that provide the resources that clubs need in order to keep progressing up. Internationally, it mostly comes through TV money. And we know that TV deals and TV are small in the United States. TV ratings are small in the United States. And the basic premise is that the excitement and the opportunity of clubs moving up through the system, and the idea that there's hard competition every time the ball is kicked, and that every game means something. There's like financial consequences and financial rewards for winning and losing. It's not going to fix everything. It's not a panacea. So I had this idea when you were talking at the beginning. Pro rel is not going to fix everything, but it is the only way things can be fixed. I really believe that. As to how it can be fixed, it can one of two ways, specifically in the United States, either through the governing body, through U.S. soccer, and getting people running for soccer political office within the state associations, because the state associations at the amateur level, when taken in whole, can have combined with the athletes council, could outweigh if I have my math correct, could outweigh the total of the professional council and the directly controlled, some seats that are controlling the balance of power in the U.S. Soccer Federation. Now, to date, the Athletes Council has not shown any initiative to speak up on that behalf. It would take the block of the state associations combining with the Athletes Council in order to move within that system. An alternative approach is establishing a separate parallel system. And so what would that governing body look like? That's actually what NISA is in the process of building. NISA is not a league. NISA is an association. And that's actually its big grandiose goal, is to be the National Independent Soccer Association. It's not the National Independent Soccer League. So that's when you look at some of these regional leagues that they're building and the infrastructure that they're trying to build, between the connections between the regional leagues like the Midwest Premier League, the Gulf Coast Premier League, and some of these people that they're bringing into their fold, through the Independent Cup and hopefully into a promotion relegation system. They want to position themselves long-term as an alternative federation that would oversee a lot of the mechanisms that are required to support this system. One of the major mechanisms that's required to support an open system, Pro Rel is kind of like it's a distraction in a way, because we're really talking about is an open system. Pro Rel is just the movement of clubs between the tiers, but an open system is all the devices that are required to make that work. And one of the biggest is training compensation and solidarity payments, transfer fees, and clubs having direct access to those revenue streams. So, and that also solves the youth soccer access. The pay to play is a scam. The pay to play is what keeps it a white country club sport. And opening an open system and having those player development revenue streams are what can solve that. So if you look at, like, a lot of times we think about the transfer fees and the multi-million-dollar transfer fees in Europe, but those transactions take place all the way down through the system in much smaller amounts. You know, if a club in the 5th tier is selling to another club in the 3rd tier, they might transfer a player for $20,000, you know, but $20,000 to a small neighborhood club, and even, you know, transferring is a big deal. And, you know, that could pay your fees and your costs for operating an amateur team for 2 or 3 years potentially. And even down to the smallest level, transferring between total amateur to amateur transfers, there would have to be money involved, where now there's really no money involved, but it would be tracked. You know, players could be transferred for $2,000, $5,000 between amateur clubs. So that's an area that creates additional revenue streams. I love your comparison of, you know, white people and big business coming into marijuana, and marijuana being a top-down. Like, that's the perfect example of the MLS model and what the MLS structure kind of does to soccer. Again, that's kind of the opposite of what an open system does. An open system is a total free market where independent sellers with minimal government restrictions would be opening their own shops and doing their own business. So I have a lot of other talking points, but I think that kind of covers most of the. One other thing, just on the country club sport thing, lacrosse, soccer comparison. It's an apt comparison. I definitely agree. But I think we see this culture changing rapidly now. The idea of college is less important for, say, like the NBA. You see additional players moving directly to Europe. You know, the ball kids going to Lithuania and setting up their own club and like all that stuff. Like that, all that type of route is possible in participation in a global system on the soccer level. So yet before all this infrastructure gets built to the point where it can sustain itself, I would advocate for more kids, you know, going to Europe at young ages, and going out there and getting money professionally any way that they can, as opposed to kind of being trapped in this system, which is different from a comparison to, say, football or basketball, because in football and basketball, there is a payoff at the end. But the reason why nobody plays soccer is because, especially Black people and especially low-income Black people, because there is no payday at the end. What's the motivation for investing your time into this shit, and you're gonna, you know, pay $2,000 a year for a college scholarship that won't even cover the cost of what you forget the pros. That college scholarship is a partial, and it's not even going to cover the amount of money that you invested in your kid to get through that pay-to-play system. You put $20,000 into pay-for-play for a $10,000 scholarship. That's backwards hustling. Then there's nothing at the top, because you get out to a $40,000 job when even given income disparities in the United States, that Black kid is better off going to get a corporate job for $60,000, and MLS can't even offer him a freaking $60,000 job. So what are we talking about? You know, there has to be a real. It has to add up. And in a promotion,
you're 100% right. You're 100% right.
Yeah, in the promotion relegation system, it does add up if all the pieces are in place. And then, so I'm going to stop, and then I have other points for other.
No, you're fine. Yeah. I totally understand your whole point. Like, and see, that's the part that I was struggling with to really get a grasp on, because when you hear people talk about pro rel, it's just like, oh, we're implementing this, we're taking it from England, putting it here. And I'm just like, that. I don't see how that's going to match up. And then, like, the point of, like, because you're totally right. Like, Black people, I hate to say this about our culture, but if we don't see a payoff in it, we're like, what's the point of me doing it? Like, let's be real. Like, I'm not going to go out here and just work for free,
We did that for 100 years.
Yeah,
we ain't working for free no
we're
more.
not doing that. So that's my thing when it comes to like college sports, like not college sports specifically, but while like, because for me, for instance, like I coach high school soccer, and I can only speak about my community where it's coaching high school soccer here in Virginia. I'm better off coaching like middle school basketball. Like in middle school basketball, I have more of a budget than I do for high school soccer, where I don't have to worry about sharing the field. I get my own practice and all this and the third. But one, I have more parental support. Two, the schools make more money from it. So they're like, well, we're going to throw more money towards basketball and football than we are soccer. So that's where it's like that delayed development is it, and that latch on of interest because, and this is also ignorance in our community as well, as we look at soccer, we look at it from the standpoint of, oh, it's a Mexican sport, or it's the prissy white boy sport. We don't look at it as a sport that could take us to X, Y, and Z destination. It can, take us to Europe, things like that. And that's mostly on like us. Like I feel like now that you're seeing different Black voices in the sport of soccer, myself, 2Cents, Florida Culture, Black Arrow. Like I feel like that dynamic is going to change because now they're seeing positive embodiments in their community that's not only talking about it, writing about it, playing about it, things of that nature, like with the interest of USLBPA or the Black Players Coalition, like things like that is going to change the outlook on it. But I know like when I was growing up, I couldn't name you a Black soccer player because I didn't know any, but that's how it looks at it in our community. But that's the part like I was struggling with, Steve, like just trying to understand like how is the system going to be built, because I mean now that you're into it, like how does, because correct me if I'm wrong, but like in MLS for instance, every team is owned by the league, right? I mean there's owners, but essentially it's owned by the league, right?
Yeah, they just own access
Right.
to a piece.
It's a single entity, so it's essentially like MLS is McDonald's, and then you have a bunch of franchise owners.
Okay, so yeah,
and they have a budget, but it's not like they can do whatever they want with it. They got to adhere to guidelines.
Okay, so and that's the part.
Actually, cannot work with the way MLS is set up right now. It has to exclude MLS and build in parallel, or MLS has to fundamentally change. But that's just something that pro-rel advocates have to accept and work to either destroy MLS or build something better, that exists outside of their influence. And their influence is minimal. And what they're doing, I would argue that the market is artificially deflated by MLS, and that their monopoly on the top tier of soccer in the United States is they have a monopoly, and like it doesn't have to be as small as it is. They do it like teams were up until just a couple years ago. Teams were having single-digit millions payrolls for 40 guys. Guys in the roster making 30 grand, 40 grand. I know they instituted a minimum salary increase a couple years ago. I think it's up to 60. Is that right?
No, it's higher now. So it's up to a 70, and over the course of the rest of the CBA, it'll get up to at least 85.
Okay, that's good. I mean, 70 is a livable wage.
At least they make more than a teacher. Hey, positives.
I mean, at the end of the day, MLS is only 25 years old. So when we compare it to these sports, NBA, NFL, sports that have billion-dollar TV deals, it's always going to be tough to attract talent when it comes to, I'm going to play soccer because I know I'm going to get the bag and I'm going to be able to take care of my family. Like, you don't see that. We're not talking about this guy signed $1 million deal to sign with LA Galaxy, but we do see, wow, LaMelo Ball just signed a Reebok deal and he's about to go top 3 pick. So until we start seeing those things, we're not going to get a mass exodus of young Black players getting into soccer, unless you have guys that are playing, like the DeMarcus Beasleys, the Eddie Johnsons, the, you know, black players that go back to their communities. And like you said earlier, getting them, you know, exposing them to be like, yo, I played soccer. This is what I was exposed to. I grew up. I was able to travel all over the world because of it. Something that you don't get in basketball or football. And really, like, kind of, you got to get like hands-on. You got to get way more hands-on if you want black youth to get involved in the sport, because from the TV, you're not going to get that.
No, definitely not. And that's where, like, it really starts like in the high school, middle school, elementary school level. I would probably even say elementary school, because that's when like your first proper introduction into sports is. That's when you kind of figure out like, all right, what sport is my friends playing? What sport I want to play? But at elementary school, like most of the money is getting backed into football, basketball, because like that's the majority of what people play. You know, and I really, like, for the high school level, man, it's like so properly underfunded, and you can tell it just based on like how certain schools just worry about soccer. Because like even in my own district, like there's 18 schools, but only 7 of us that play soccer. We're the only predominantly black school in the city that plays soccer, that has a proper soccer program, boys and girls. You know, outside of that, there's no one else. So it's like when I take my girls to go play like these other high schools out in the county, it's like they're getting bankrolled. You know, they got players that play at Richmond Elite, you know, Richmond Strikers, all this stuff. My girls are conditioning for basketball, you know?
Yeah.
And that's the mindset of how black people see soccer. They see it as something like, one, they don't want to play the sport because they don't want to run.
Yeah, facts.
2, they don't want to play the sport. Yeah, exactly, right? We'll run track, but we don't want to run around the soccer field. But it's like, it's just that mindset of, and I had to like really sit down with my parents and tell them like, soccer is not a sport where you just run. There's a whole, like, the foundations of soccer can truly help you out in any sport.
Yeah.
But if you're going to play it, you have to be serious about playing it. And it's the thing about with soccer is like, they just use it for conditioning to get ready for basketball. They don't see it as, I can have this, you know, long-lasting career. Because even in women's soccer, for instance, like, even that, like, how much of a muddled mess that is. You know, you have women that play the sport now that don't even see the payoff of it, of how far they're going within the sport. You know,
makes sense. Can I shift this in a slightly different direction about investment? So I've been doing some research and looking at, I have these reports are slightly dated, but I do have some specific facts that I wanted to bring forth. So I was thinking about what could we do to spur investment for black owners and potential black owners to get involved in building these clubs. So I was looking at this report from Credit Suisse from a couple years ago about the wealth patterns among the top 5% of African Americans. So that dollar amount, and we all know about wealth disparities in the United States, racial wealth disparities, it's egregious. But just to level set, the top 5% of African Americans have a net worth of $356,900, according to this report. So that's the top 5%. And when you look at the investing patterns of those people, you see the top 5% of African Americans have significantly less equity in business assets than comparably capitalized white people. So 9% of non-financial assets for the top 5% of black earners are in business assets. 37% of top 5% white earners are in business assets. 30% of their assets are in businesses. Only 9% of the top 5% of black people who hit that threshold are in businesses. So there's a business equity gap there. There's also, but when you dig deeper and look into where those top 5% black earners are investing, it's actually more in real estate outside the primary home than for comparatively capitalized whites. So 41% of, read this right, yeah, more in real estate. 41% of Black equity is in non-primary home real estate. So, rental properties, things like that. It's a safe bet. It can't totally be destroyed because you can always, the safest thing is real estate. You can always sell off a piece of property versus only, so 41% of that Black capitalization versus 22% of white. And if you look at, but it does go more to residential than commercial. So the mean value of a residential investment property from a Black investor is actually much higher than the mean value of a comparative property invested in by whites. It's like 245,000 versus 167,000, with the Black investors' properties being worth much more. So I think that real estate is a key component of investment in lower division soccer infrastructure. So that's how it can be positioned as, and we want that as fans too. We want these small soccer specific stadiums. And so encouraging investment, community investment in building small soccer fields with small bleachers, but, getting that 3-acre plot and owning that land could be a strategy for encouraging investment in this for Black investors. And we know that there's so many teams out there in the UPSL and NPSL, the vast majority of them, white or the small number that are Black owned, are, they rent high schools, and it's a money suck but if a little more upfront investment could build something for the long term that's going to be able to be grown through an open system and have opportunities to bring that real estate and build up a stadium and rise that club through the ranks. And I think you guys mentioned it in the opening. Dr. Kingsley Okonkwo, I don't want to pronounce his name wrong. You guys?
I think you're right.
Okonkwo?
Yeah. Yeah. So he's the primary owner of that USL League 2 headed towards League 1 club franchise there in Corpus Christi, and he's building his own 17.2 million sports complex with a 5,000 seat stadium. That's the type of asset that should be attracting wealthy Black investors into the soccer space, because there's no room in the NFL for somebody who's rich but not a billionaire to make a $17 million investment. But those people are out there, and soccer is like the only sport that provides that medium entry point for investment. An open system would allow that investment to gain equity and to build up. And the last thing I want to make before I shut up on this point is when you look at like USL versus the independent side, like a UPSL, like that's his money. Why should he have to give a check to Jake Edwards at USL to run that facility and to run that club? Like USL, just franchise fees are a scam. They just take the money off the top. But that's money. Whatever they pay the USL is more money they could be investing directly into the club, directly into players who could then be built up, sold off for transfer fees, bring more revenue back into the club, and try to build it up through the system. So I'll shut up and I want
No, that's a good point that you made. I know a lot of the lower league teams or low league owners are looking at the real estate around building a team. So you see a lot of teams.
A lot of them are real estate investors.
Yeah. So that's like how they're getting it. They're building multi-purpose complexes and figuring out how to combine the USL franchise or lower league franchise. And then you brought up a great point. All I'm going to say is that I know a couple of USL franchises that are looking at alternatives when it comes to NISA. I think you'll see NISA grow tremendously over the next 3 to 5 years in terms of exposure and expansion.
Yeah. Nah, I mean, to make sure I get your point right. So pretty much what you're saying is like there's a lot of Black investors, real estate investors, and you're saying like certain teams need to pair with these investors to then use that land to expand. Okay, cool. I want to make sure I got that right before anything else. I mean,
yeah, that's interesting. I didn't even think about pairing with investors. I was thinking those investors start their own thing. But that they would pair with somebody with soccer expertise and stuff like that, to your point, is actually even better.
Okay, yeah. And that's the point I thought you were making at first, but okay, cool. Yeah. I hope it works out. That's all I got to say to it, man. Yeah. I hope it works out, man. And that's the thing, like I said before, like I'm not anti-pro rel, anything like that. I'm just anti just doing something just for the sake of doing it. And I want to understand like the mechanics. And I'm not gonna lie, like I'm not one of these people that's on Twitter or social media. You know, you see a lot of people like flaunt, like I know it. You know, I'm not wrong in this. I'll admit, like I do not know pro rel. Hell, I barely understand Tam and Gam. So I know I don't understand pro rel.
But in pro rel, you wouldn't have to worry about.
So do you guys think USA, like the States, is too big to handle pro rel?
No, I think it's better that it's big because you could it's going to be fascinating to see the tiering and the hyper local way that it's structured at the bottom and how it would build out. I think it would build those local rivalries. You know, when you look at I know we talked about this on a previous episode, but like watch that Kinston basketball documentary and you see how they have 5 different independent gyms in a town of 20,000 people. Yeah. Like that, those if each of those actually had their own teams, those rivalries are the fiercest rivalries. That's going to be what the base of the pyramid is going to look like. These hyper local, you know, high school like rivalries, Kinston versus Goldsboro. That's what the bottom is going to be. And then it's going to build up bigger and bigger. And the energy starts becoming less about the local rivalry and more about the, you know, traditional professional sports as you rise up the pyramid through the ranks.
Yeah, and that's one thing, like being in Richmond, like we kind of always are struggling with. Like we got a great with USL League One because it's like we were promised like a local rival when we went down. Like our local rival is Greensville, which is 4 hours away. Like we got Loudoun, which is 2 hours away, Virginia Beach United, Virginia Beach City, Lionsbridge, Lynchburg that just joined UPSL, like all closer to us, but like the chances of them joining USL League One is slim to none, you know? And that's the thing, like I would love to see more, like if we truly do get this system that is built, and that's why I'm hoping that it's not a system built from the top down. I want it to be something built from the bottom up, because like if you build the foundation, there's no point of building a house if you build the roof first, you know? Like build the foundations out and then let it build up. And that's why I'm hoping like if, you know, pro rel does happen, like Richmond finally does have like these proper like in-state rivalries. Cause then I don't have to like save up half a year's teacher salary to go to Madison. Like I could just get in my car and go to the 7-5 and hang on to Hampton, you know?
Yeah. I want to touch on kind of bringing it back to the economic point, right? So Steve, I think you're spot on when it comes to the real estate angle, but also you have to kind of think about systemically Black people who are acquiring wealth and acquiring it for the first time, what that wealth means to them and to their family, right? We ain't never had shit. So I'm investing in real estate as a means to kind of build that generational wealth. But when you think about a sports team, it's a luxury investment. It's not necessarily like a necessity investment. So it's always seen kind of like as a loss leader. So like, that's why you see a lot of billionaires, you see a lot of multimillionaires who have like fractional ownership in a team or something like that, right? But I think kind of tailoring that angle in kind of exposing people, like, first of all, how many people understand the business of soccer, you know, to even know that, all right, let me build this field. I get rental fees from a league, all this other stuff, you know. So there's not a lot of understanding of the business in our community, except for those who are already kind of entrenched in the game. And that's like a small minority of us, right? So there's some education that needs to happen there. But also kind of bridging that gap. So those with knowledge kind of approaching those individuals who may be looking to invest in some type of sport, or they may be big sports lovers and want to invest someday when they reach their multi-millions, but understand you don't have to have multi-millions to kind of get in on the ground floor with this sport. So there's a lot of education and gap bridging that I think could happen that could kind of open up that awareness to more people in the Black community. And then also, as it's been mentioned earlier, there's no clear pathway to, success when it comes to soccer for, African Americans. You have the clear pathway from the, youth level all the way up through college for football and basketball, even baseball to a degree, which is kind of dying off a little bit. But for those main two sports, football and basketball, you can see the clear pathway. There's structures that are built on every level to kind of help you get to that next level. So I think it's a matter of exposure.
Basketball would be totally game changing in this country. I think that's probably the path. I see that as, I've long thought that in the last couple of years, my feelings have been a little bit radicalized on that. Like just creating an open system of independent basketball clubs and bypassing the exploitative college athletics where basketball has an even lower, entry point, lower overhead. Like that would be, I think that would be game changing, and the soccer could trail that. It'd be hard to break apart the NBA, but at least for, an alternative beyond the D League and rec, like communities could be represented using that kind of Kinston example. Like, what do you think of that?
The thing with basketball is sports like the NBA, NFL, like they kind of already have they have their hooks already in it. Like the NFL owns a day of the week. That's insane. But when it comes to basketball, you have other little pop-up leagues, but as far as building something that's going to be comparable on the level of the NBA, I struggle to see how that's going to be successful because the NBA have the deals with ESPN, TNT, they're kind of already throwing away college basketball. If you play college basketball,
everybody's ready to throw away college basketball anyway. One and done is a minimum reality, and more people are bypassing it. And we know that the vast majority of NBA players are Black anyway.
But the vast majority
NBA is more susceptible to being broken apart by the will of the people if the people were sufficiently willed to birth that into existence. Is I guess what I'm saying.
And that's very true. But like Elle said earlier, the educational part of that needs to happen. Mm-hmm. See, the thing about it is there's no educational part being talked about in there. It's the thing about it's ingrained in our head, in African Americans' head of I go to college, if I don't make it to the league, I got this 4-year degree to fall back on because I always got to have a rainy day fund. And the reason why I need to have a rainy day fund is because I know something's going to go wrong. And the other thing too about it is that, for real, it's only a small percentage. I think what is 5 or 4% of college basketball players actually play minutes in the NBA. And I think that number was double in G League. But the pathway to it, what college can open up for African Americans, I think is something that you won't see us just automatically be forget college basketball. I'm just gonna try to find this alternate route because how great the LaMelo Ball story is, that story is 1 out of 10,000. Yeah, it doesn't work out that way for everyone because the reason why, and this is no fault of LaMelo, I'm super happy for him that I'm all about go get your money, go get paid. But the reason why his story was successful is because he had a backing of financial wealth behind him to say you can go spend a year in Lithuania. You could go spend a year at Independence High School, up in Ohio. You could go spend a year in Australia. The normal Black family can't do that because our academic wealth doesn't stretch that far. So it's
aren't there hundreds and hundreds of I don't want to have, that's a little hyperbole, but aren't there hundreds of basketball players every year that go across Europe to play professionally? I went to UNCG, and every year most of the team probably went on to play in Greece or Spain or one of these places.
There's hundreds of teams that go play overseas, but it's not that thing of my cousin he went to UNCG. I think he graduated 2015. Went to go play overseas, but it was that thing of he went to college to go get his degree because in Black families, like hell, my parents said it to me, like, I can't afford for you to go to UVA. I can't afford for you to go to Tech. So wherever school offers you this free ride, that's where you're going. And that's the way how it works in our community, where it's like we're not financially bankrolled where we could, take off a year and just be like, hey, I'm gonna go play over here. It's like for my cousin, for instance, like he went over to go play in Europe because they guaranteed him a contract. It wasn't like he went over there just because like I want to bypass the whole college system. Like he was just like, all right, I played my 4 years here, NBA. I'm not good enough to get in the draft, so I'll take my time playing in Europe. And if it works out, it works out. It doesn't, but I have a fallback plan of a college degree. So that's where that whole thing of it, and I definitely understand where you're coming from about, the system does need to be reworked. It can be thrown away if the people get behind it. But that is two components of it. It's the education of it that needs to happen, and is also the financial backing, because a small percentage of African Americans have a good financial backing where if you were to pass away today, your kids will be fine. Not like if I pass away today, my kids are still going to have to go out here, get a 4-year degree, maybe get a master's degree. And then, it takes time for that to build. And that's where that systematic foundation for African Americans in the sport of soccer, it's weird because now you're starting to see it kind of blossom a little bit. And that's where like me, for instance, I'm rooting super heavy for Beasley, the Corpus Christi owner, Maryland Bobcats, New Jersey teams, because they're the first Black owners that we've actually properly seen work and get it right. We haven't seen Beasley yet out in Fort Wayne. We haven't seen how that's all going to run. But like Charlie Adams, like I'm hoping that works out there. Because if they get it straight, then that means now there's more visible eyes. There's more people understanding that education is building. People are now seeing like, okay, the Black owner works. It's almost in the same component of when Doug Williams won a Super Bowl. Because up to that time point, what was the thing about a Black quarterback? He wasn't smart enough for the position. They're just super athletic. They're just wide receivers playing quarterback. But it's not till he won the Super Bowl that then they were like, oh, they're actually very well. And then you saw the second incarnation of that with Warren Moon and all of them. And then people are like, oh, okay, they can actually do it. And then you saw the third incarnation of that with Steve McNair and Michael Vick. And now you're seeing the fourth incarnation of that with Lamar Ball. You still have people out there that still use like little slight jabs of, oh, he only make your first read. Oh, he only do this. I know I'm talking football. I'm sorry, but like these are analogies that work for me. But, it's going to take multiple incarnations for Black people to get that stable foothold. But this is the thing about that I love about our culture so much is once we have that stable foothold, we are full throttle, like 100% full throttle. So that's why like those owners, those set of owners, like I know they're going to be successful, but I need them to be over the top successful. So then 10 years down the line, another set of 20 owners can then come in, buy some teams, and then they take over. And then 40, and then it builds on top of that. But you always need that first base layer to be super successful for us. And like I had the conversation with George Metellus, and like he's, if I'm correct, I think he's the only African American color commentator, like soccer commentator out there, like that any of us see. But
like,
the thing about it,
hold up, like live commentator?
Not live, but like calling games, like play-by-play.
Like play-by-play, or like because you have a color commentary and then the play-by-play.
I'm my fault. What he does? I think he does play-by-play.
Okay, because color commentary, there's a bunch of Black.
Who else is out there? I'm asking because I want to know. Like,
Maurice Adu, Charlie Davies, Cody Jones.
Okay. Know this.
Yeah, a couple ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like him, for instance, and the reason why I know George because he was the first one I ever knew.
Okay.
Like he was the first. Like my first introduction to the sport was being in sports, and I saw him calling the game. But it's like it takes like people like them. It's someone that's not like an ex-athlete, but someone that's like, I went to school for journalism. I got into the sport. and to be that torchbearer, then it expands from there, because then it's like that representation. You see it, you're like, oh, I can do this.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where that thing is. So you're right on that point, Z, but like for Black people, the education needs to be there and the financial backing for it to truly grow. It's just a seed right now, but when you get those two, they'll blossom.
And to touch on your earlier point about the NBA breaking off, I think the biggest thing it comes down to the real estate. You got to have your own stadiums. You can't rent the stadiums of the leagues you're competing with. I think Ice Cube's 3-on-3 league is successful, but you can only do so much. The year of the lockout, when they're playing in high school gyms, they got a big following. But if you really want to expand, you got to have your own stadiums. So if anything, in order to make money, you got to spend money. And obviously the players have control. If LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry decided to, do their own thing, a lot of people would follow them. But at the end of the day, you're competing with billionaires who have a bunch of real estate. So,
and then also the Good Old Boys Network.
Yeah.
As much as I love LeBron, KD, all of them, there's only so much they can do because the billionaires for real got the backing of these TV markets.
Yeah.
So they can be like, LeBron and them could go create their own league, but then these billionaires could be like, all right, ESPN, if you showed one of their games, we're pulling out.
Yeah,
ABC, CBS,
that's
same
true.
thing.
You got Twitch, you got YouTube. You can have Discord, live streaming on your own. But then that takes more work, and who's willing to, put the work in to grow something from the ground up.
All
the bill for it.
A lot of work. It's so easy. There's no silver bullet. Anybody who says that pro-rel or an open system is a silver bullet is not true. I'm under no delusions in thinking that it's easy, but I believe that it's like the only way that it's possible.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna have you guys back for a part 2, where we can get into a little bit more of the solutioning side. And figure out like how we can actually build something like this, or at least expand the awareness of other ethnic groups of people, other people of various economical statuses on the access in the really not just the access, but also the viability of soccer in America if the system is open. So want to definitely thank you guys for coming on. Appreciate the discussion. I know we're definitely gonna, like I mentioned before, we're definitely gonna have a part 2 so that we can really dig into this a little bit more. But yeah, Amobi, you have anything else?
Nah, anytime we get you guys on, I know it's a great discussion. Pro-rel, I feel like we can go on another hour, which is why we're gonna do another part 2. Besides that, make sure you get the gear. If it's not too late to get a little holiday gift in for your peoples. But that's it on my end.
Yep. So as usual, subscribe, rate, review, helps us get discovered. Follow us on the socials at 2Cents FC. Where can we follow you guys, Steve?
At Non-League USA on Twitter, at Non-League America on Instagram. Not as active over there. Twitter is the #1 platform at Non-League USA. Follow us. A lot of interesting stuff is going to be coming out of the Non-League America world in 2021. So be on the lookout for some unexpected movement and some unexpected announcements. For
sure. Yogi?
Okay.
Yeah, you can follow our podcast at RiverCity 93. We're about to kick back up with Can I Kick It Season 2 and RiverCity 93, the DocuPod series Part 2. And you can follow me personally at Yogi McLovin on Twitter, but don't follow me after 11 p.m.
Okay. Twitter after dark.
Yeah, soccer after dark. You got to put it like that.
For sure. And definitely check out our merch at 2centsports.shop. You see the sweatshirt I got on. I think Non-League America has some merch as well. So hit up nonleagueamerica.com. Check them out. Tweet us your comments on the show, any topics you want us to discuss. Until next time, folks, y'all have a good one. Peace out.
Peace.